Welcome to The Human Element, presented by Whisk. I'm your host, Barb Biden, and in each episode, I sit down with CHROs and senior HR leaders to explore how AI, innovation, and human insight are reshaping the future of HR. We'll explore how technology is reshaping leadership, strategy, and the role of HR by sharing candid stories, practical ideas, and strategic perspectives to help you shape the future. The Human Element is brought to you by Whisk, the leader in agentic HR and creator of Harper, the world's first AI HR generalist. Learn how Harper can resolve up to 80% of routine HR tasks autonomously. Learn more about Whisk at whisk.com. My guest today is John Foster. John is the Chief People Officer at Tala, the global fintech making financial access real for underserved markets. John is also the founder of Gamut, where he spent years developing what he calls a framework for building winning organizations. John has a rare combination of being a deep practitioner and also having come up with a genuine intellectual framework. John's work spans organizational design, culture, leadership, and now also AI's role in fundamentally restructuring how work gets done. So not just optimizing it, but actually restructuring it. John, welcome to The Human Element. I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
If it's okay with you, let's start with your background, Tala, Gamut, and the thinking that connects them. Talk me through that.
Sure. I've been working inside organizations for longer than I'd like to admit, probably over 20 years now. So I think that the work that I like to do is constructive and it's building work. So to me, it's kind of important to be inside companies as much as possible. But I've also worked across a lot of companies, and the thread that holds it together is what I call Gamut. It's my consulting work. It's my learning and development, training work. It's coaching. And as I've worked from company to company, I've gathered some of my insights and developed ideas that to me just kind of hold my work together. So it's my portable kind of toolkit when I show up. So they work well together.
100%. Sounds like that work really serves to inform your internal roles as well. Let's start on the AI topic. I love that you talk about AI not really being about optimization. It is about restructuring the work itself, which I underline and underscore. I could not agree more. Unpack your thinking on that a little bit for me.
Well, we've had quite a lot of technology change in my life. And I think if you just zoom out real quick and think about stuff like the book Future Shock, which came out in 1970. And we talk a lot about Moore's Law and how it's changing the way we can do computing by making things faster. We're at a point now where AI is a whole different animal in terms of what it allows us to do. It's a way to construct work that can help us rethink every single thing from the ground up. So to me, it's a category changing. I don't even know. It's like a paradigm changing component that we're in now.
Oh, completely. And it's such an opportunity, I think is kind of how you're framing it, right? Optimizing almost doesn't give credit to the opportunity at hand, right? It's not just a small shift, it's a paradigm shift. I'm wondering about your framework, organization market fit. That parallels product market fit, right, as a concept. How does that framework, talk us through that a little bit more and help us understand how that holds up when AI joins the party?
That AI might actually be the unlock finally for us to have a diversity of organizations. I think we've traditionally for, again, most of my career and for probably 100 years, we've been working in a model that was invented pretty much in the Industrial Revolution, built on hierarchy, which has been around since the Roman military. So like the concept of how people organize hasn't really been radically altered for a long time. And I'd say, yeah, and pre-civilization, I think that there was probably other ways to organize. But like right now, it feels like, and I like to think of this as like a new phase in the earth, like when the Cambrian period hit the world, there was a bunch of oxygen and suddenly there was just all this like proliferation of different kinds of life forms. And I think we're entering that right now where AI is sort of like oxygen. It's going to give organizations choice and energy to do things however they want. So to me, organization market fit is about making sure how you're organized is is purpose built to do exactly the work you want to do. The same way an animal is adapted to its ecosystem, I think companies need to adapt to their conditions.
How are you thinking about that, practically speaking, and applying it internally? What are some of the ways that you are really stepping back and rethinking the way that work is done in a practical sense?
Well, I mean, so at Tala and other places where I've been recently, even in the past 3 or 4 years, this has been a topic, I think, already. So I think it starts with your customer. You got to figure out, like, what exactly are we trying to do? In my building or my winning organizations framework, the first part of it is, do you have a clear strategy? Do you know what your customer needs and how you're going to win? And that piece, I think, in a lot of companies is not as clear as it might be, because it's maybe the business itself is an optimization business. We can talk about some of those examples if you want to dig in, but what can change is the way you actually interact with your customer. So we might have an agent interacting with a customer before they ever touch one of our products. And if we're not careful, we could be disintermediated by someone else who builds an agent that helps people explore financial well-being. For example, if I'm in Mexico and I have a cell phone, I could have an interaction with something that might take them to us or away from us. So for us, it might make sense to become the brand and the relationship with customers when they have a question about anything that has to do with finance.
Got it. I think what I would love to dig in on, because I think that we've been hearing folks talk a lot about, start with the work. You are talking about rethinking the work, right? Going back to the strategy. Are you seeing some actions out in the world where folks maybe what does that look like when folks are optimizing instead of actually rethinking the work? How do you see that showing up in places as folks talk about AI?
Just to get ready, I think there's a really interesting thing happening in the automotive world. Everybody's really familiar with Tesla. If you live in the Bay Area or one of the big cities where Waymo has landed, you now see a Waymo vehicle all day long. I see them even in LA now. This is a rethinking of mobility. So instead of thinking, if I'm Ford, I'm selling cars, and I've been selling cars since, the beginning of the Model T, and I've been building them in a production line that's in assembly with this huge supply chain. Suddenly somebody can come to market with a mobility solution that might make cars no longer useful. And so that's how radical things are getting. And I think some of the things, just thinking about autonomous driving, for example, it's taken a long time. People were promising autonomous driving, I think basically the beginning of Uber. That was the whole idea. And I think that was like 10 years ago. And Uber turned into a service. But, meanwhile, the technology has developed substantially that now you could have autonomous trucking. So what if you want to be a trucking logistics business? If you own the platform and the platform runs with a subscription instead of having a trucking company, it's a whole new business. And see, these kinds of things weren't possible even a couple of years ago. So I think this vertical curve, like exponential power curve of technology, is really opening up creativity in ways that we just haven't been able to do for decades. Maybe even, I don't know, maybe this is as big as the Industrial Revolution. I think it's going to be pretty substantial.
Yeah, I feel the same, that we have not even scratched the surface, right, of what this is going to do to transform how we work. I'm curious whether there's anything that you have done at Tala as you've been rethinking the work and gotten to a place where you do want to insert AI into your workflows. What are the places or workflows that you've rethought first?
I think that it started deeper with our software development cycle, where we've had people rethinking, like, what's the cascade? Do we still do agile? Do we do how do we make software? That's being renovated and explored right now. For me, on a more personal level, I'm in a point where I'm having the most creative, fun time in a long time. I've been working on performance management since the late 90s. And performance management, by its nature, is sort of an optimization of hierarchy. It's, are people doing what they're supposed to do? Are they doing good work? And maybe 15 years ago, I started really asking, what's the real reason we have it? Because it doesn't seem to be something people like. There's all sorts of conversations over the years about how we need to kill the performance review and annual reviews are no good and all this stuff. Today, I can now imagine that I could build an agent that would help somebody answer the question, am I doing the right work and is this good work? And then they could ask another question and say, am I being paid fairly for this work? And instead of having to train a manager to use all of this software and all this data that we have in the background and all the slow aspect it takes to get everybody able to answer that question, I can have an agent answer that question in about 10 seconds. And it will
Yeah.
be more accurate and more helpful than anything I've ever been able to produce in traditional performance management. So like, I think that's just around the corner for us. And we're working on it right now at Tala. There's probably vendors working on it as well. So we're kind of exploring both sides. Should we build or buy? But this is like, the issue here won't be, can we make performance management faster with workflows that allow us to like see if people did the reviews and turn them in and check them off and evaluate them, or even scroll through those to look for keywords and summarize it. It's going to be, let's just change the whole process from here's what I think you should do and here's what I don't think you did, to an individually driven, super empowering, I know how I'm doing and I can just keep going or I can change. That creates empowerment that we've just never had. So
Yeah, I
that's
think, well, and I mean, you and I both know the sort of work volume that HR teams can experience, right? And I think some of the work that feels like on the optimization end of things comes from a place of just needing to kind of get things done, right? And being stuck in the routine of doing things a certain way. I've seen some interesting things happen where maybe we didn't start with the work and we started with optimization, get into the optimization, realize how much faster we can go with a particular thing, which then leads to the question, like the type that you're describing, where almost teams weren't letting themselves go to the big question of how do we reinvent this? Like, what does this look like if we start over? Because it maybe didn't feel feasible in all cases, right?
right.
Because if you do start over, then you've got to build, right, with your own two hands, a year or two or 5 years ago, where you go from there. So I really think that even for the folks who are sitting there going, rethinking the work feels difficult, even leveraging AI to find the space to get to the place where you can rethink
Yeah.
the work is something I've been thinking a lot about. I don't know
And
if
use
any
AI
thoughts?
yeah, I mean, a couple there. One is you can also use AI to help you rethink, right? Like that's the irony of the whole thing is if I have a hard question, I now start with Claude or ChatGPT. It doesn't matter what the model is, but you can get it to help you brainstorm and you can have a thinking partner that actually, sometimes this will sound super arrogant, but sometimes the questions I ask are so bizarre that people just look at me and scratch my head. I don't get that with AI. It actually gives me an answer. And and if the answer is stupid, then I can say, well, that sounds stupid. And I can actually evolve it. So that's just an aside. But
Yep.
to me, the issue, this is what I call scratch OD, was like scratch cooking. If you can cook from scratch, you understand ingredients and you understand how they work together, the chemistry, you understand what heat does, you understand dry heat versus boiling and steam. And there's all kinds of little underlying things that a chef is really good at. And we use this analogy in our training at Tala. We say, you're now a chef and you need to be good enough as a chef to understand all the basic ingredients to be able to orchestrate the kitchen and turn it into something that's useful. And that always, 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 this is just a basic business thing, starts with your customer. So in HR, your customer is your employee, probably. I mean, you can really even push it harder, but let's just say so use a tool like an employee journey and you ask the question, what does a person need to be, and then I have a framework about what do people need from work? They need to feel safe. They need to feel like they have the tools they need to be productive. They need to feel like they can be fulfilled. So that's engagement. This needs to be sustainable. So I need to be able to do this for a long period of time. And ultimately it should help me learn and grow as a person and transform me. So that's ingredients of human desire and human motivation comes from self-determination theory. So if I'm a chef in HR and I understand that's what people want, then I can ask a far harder question than how can I make performance management better? I can say, how can I make people happy at work? And it will start taking me to whole different levels of, wow, we never could do that at work before. It was too expensive, or it was a bolt on, or it was like training and a brown bag lunch and nobody has time, so they don't show up. You're like, all of those problems can go away if you ask the more fundamental questions. So I use a lot of my psychology and sociology background to start asking the hard questions, and it leads us to really big breakthroughs.
I could not agree more. And there is freedom in doing that. And it's something I've been actively encouraging in my team, right? Is like, what is this? What should this look like, right? And if I get an early answer that's like an optimization layer on what we've been doing, I'm like, no, no, no. Like,
Yeah.
what
Try
should we
again.
do? What should we
Right.
do? And it's almost I felt like it's not. I've got a great team. They're super smart. It's giving the permission and the freedom to go back to that bigger question. So let's shift gears a little bit and a little bit away from AI and talking about leadership. As a leader, what is something that you wish that maybe someone had told you earlier in your career about how to navigate organizational complexity or just navigate as a people leader in general?
I tell people, like, I have a couple of moments in my career where I really realized I was like not being useful. And I think I needed more empathy for defensiveness in leaders. Leaders, I think I was always just sort of like raising my hand saying, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do this?" And I was like the little kid, like tapping on your knee saying, "Daddy, Daddy, can we go out and play? And can we do this?" So my energy, while it was enthusiastic and constructive, I think often put people on the defensive. And I just had no idea. And so, I mean, I even had a boss one time that told me, we're in the middle of a room having a conversation, and he said, "You can take your foot off my throat now, Foster." And I was like, "What?" Like, I thought I was asking questions, and what I was doing is making him really uncomfortable. And so for me, I think realizing if you're going to be a change agent, it takes a tremendous amount of patience and empathy to help people get past some of they're overwhelmed, right? Almost every leader has too much to do. And this is something that's now going to cause them to really think hard, and they're not always ready. So take the time, be patient, put answers together with options, like here's 3 choices, take a look at it. Let me know when you want to talk, instead of being just sort of like, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? So that was for me, that was a big lesson. Just recognizing that everybody's busy.
Yeah. When you had that realization, what are some of the behaviors that it caused you to shift as a result when you realized you needed that greater level of empathy for the leaders you're working with?
It caused me to become less of a follower and more of a leader myself. So like what I was doing is I thought I was being a service oriented, helpful, hardworking person, and I had more capacity than they could use. So then I would get annoyed. I'd be like, nobody wants to do this. And I would get frustrated, and I would get sort of like disengaged then and say, well, nobody wants to do anything good around here. So it changed, my attitude would get sort of negative. And I think what I realize now is that's up to me. I can choose how I'm going to behave. And it's actually my responsibility to not be a problem, but not add burden, but to like understand and make my own judgments about timing and what prioritization and what things are going to make the most sense. Think through things way more systematically. So it just made me grow up, I think, a lot.
Yeah, I feel like a symptom, right, that listeners of the show might see in their organization of this happening, right? If they were, if your team's doing a ton of great work, you're rolling it out, it's great work, and the uptake is not there. And it just feels like, why is this not landing with the organization?
Yep.
I know I've seen that feels
Yep.
like a symptom of the thing that you're describing, like
Exactly.
too much of a good thing ends up being the opposite, right? Has the opposite impact and as intended, and it's not seen as a good thing. And it just feels like you're, blasting leaders with the fire hose. So
Mhm.
I think ultimately what you're talking about is reorienting around the leader's perspective, right? And what they're trying to do, which then we could kind of get into a whole tying what we do as HR leaders, tying that to the needs of the business, the strategy of the business, driving
Okay.
what that leader wants to drive versus,
Yeah.
just like pushing a good thing for the sake of, it's what we should do, et cetera.
Right.
That might
Right.
feel anything else that you think that shows up as in an organization that listeners might see or feel or be experiencing?
Yeah, I think you summarized that really well in terms of HR. Like, you can be a great HR function, but the HR function is not the business. And so standing on our, mountain of expectations around how people are supposed to be treated and what's legal and what's not and what's right and what's wrong. When I hear HR people talking like that, I don't think they understand these are all correct, right? You can be absolutely correct and still not be effective. So finding out how to convert that into where can we make a difference and how can we make sure people are feeling good about the work, it's really tricky. And it's so easy to overwhelm the business because you've got to function with 20 people that are all producing extra things for people to think about. So yeah, I think you described it really well.
So, getting back to sort of a future focus, something that you've been quoted as saying is that 2026 is the full arrival of future shock. So the permanent condition of change that Toffler predicted in 1970. What does the winning organization look like in this future world that you've helped us to envision?
This is the fun part, right? I think there's not going to be one thing. Companies are so monolithic right now. They have a pretty much a hierarchical structure with a CEO and then direct reports. When we talk about spans of control and layers and functions and things like that. In the model that I work with, I took away a lot of that language so we could look at a deeper level, more like molecular level. And, so like culture can be one of the molecules, right? It could be anything, but it should be what's helpful to your business. And the shape an organization is going to take is where the functions is going to, I think where the most change is going to be is the structural aspects of workflows and divisions of labor are breaking down all over the place. So we're seeing more full stack players who can do multiple things because they don't need the intelligence necessarily to do everything because the agents have it for them. That's scary to some people. It's like, well, if you don't know everything, how can you do it? And I was like, I don't know. I turn on my phone every day and I have really no idea how it works. And if anybody asks, how does electricity work when you turn on the light switch? Most people probably can give you some kind of an answer, but they don't really know. So I think we have to get used to the idea that some of the things we used to take pride in and identity in are probably no longer actually what we should have an identity in. So really good organizations are going to be very customer focused, very strategic, and they're going to constantly be evolving because change is happening all the time. If a customer's needs change from day to day, if mobility is what I need, not a car, then Ford needs to pay close attention to people, not cars. And I think that's what the winning organizations are going to look like. They're going to be customer-centric, very adaptable, and probably modular so that they can deconstruct and construct in different ways.
Yeah, and ultimately not too tied to the things that they have taken great pride in holding on to in the past, right? So some level of like mental agility, maybe to believe, right, that the things that are important for the future may not attach in the same way to the things of the past as they have before. So I think that's a sort of a big thought, but also really, really important, right? It requires a level of expanding your thinking that I don't think any of us who are in the workforce today have a comparable example of having to truly do in the way we're going to have to do it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's a first generation problem, but it's an old school answer. And the idea of being in a business for a customer is as old as business. The transactions that keep people connecting and have economic value are an exchange between a customer and a provider. And that's the identity that I think is the more, that one you can carry through lots of different disruptions. If you're identified with a product, or you're identified with a technology, that's fun for a while, but it will probably go away. So like, there's nothing wrong with being a company that develops a technology. But if you want to have a sustainable business, you have to be connected to a customer. And that to me that's your antidote to change. It just keeps you constantly relevant.
I love it. I had another guest that said, fall in love with the problem. And that it's like fall in love with the needs of your customers and become obsessed with those pieces versus, I guess it would reorient you really quickly if you were attached to the wrong things and you weren't close enough to your customer needs, but a little too tied to delivering a particular product in a particular way versus actually designing and creating for the customer.
That's fine. You can just do it for a short time and go through the growth curve and get in and get out, right? You could have a portfolio of product-oriented businesses that you think of as short-term, and maybe jobs are like that too in the future. Maybe my job isn't a career. We've already had people talking about project-based learning and skills-based organization. To me, those are just versions of this modular kind of option. And it becomes a little scary because how do you get paid over time if you don't have a permanent promise in a salary that's going to last for several years? Like that feels very, I think, scary to a lot of people. And so maybe our systems around pay need to change too, right? This is where disruption gets like systematic. It's gonna affect everything.
So I could go down several rabbit holes with the big ideas that we are talking about, because you really are getting the wheels turning, right, on just how big the shift can be. But I am going to lead us into our lightning round and just do some quick hit questions, John, here to wrap us up. So starting with organization market fit, one company that has it right now and one that might be losing it.
Well, the one that I think Trader Joe's has it. When you think
All
about
right.
how Joe's does grocery and the integration across their whole business model and the way their teams behave, how their days are structured, that company has fit themselves into a niche that has never lost money. And if you want to know more about that story, check the Acquired podcast. They have a great backgrounds on these kinds of companies. The ones that are losing it, I would say I'll just go back to Ford. The big car companies are they're losing track. And we've seen one fail just a few years ago that got recovered. So like, I think that these huge giant industries are going to start falling apart and need to break up. So that's going to be very disruptive.
Yeah. A whole rethinking is very difficult at a level of scale, right? It like you create patterns of behavior in organizations like that in order to scale, right? You create systems, and then the idea of being open to like blowing those systems up and rethinking, it's really hard.
And it's expensive, right? Like we've both been in the industry. When I worked at Hulu, it was a disruptive force to do streaming, and we were owned as a joint venture by all the incumbents. And this is the innovator's dilemma. They did a pretty good job of investing in Hulu, but Netflix and others came along and just took advantage faster. And Hulu could have been as big as Netflix, but the incumbents held us back because it was going to eat away their core business, billions of dollars. So it's not like it's easy. And that's why the innovator's dilemma is such a great piece of work. Again, if someone wants to read more about that, it's Clayton Christensen. It describes this problem pretty well.
Yeah. Like if big companies thought that, startups moving fast was a risk before, startups just got even faster, right? And so
they don't even have to be startups anymore. They can just be businesses.
100%. Yeah. Like skip that whole phase and move to a level of success so much more quickly. So what do you think the biggest myth is about AI replacing people leaders? Do you believe it's true or false? What's the myth there?
Replacing people leaders. So my thinking lately is that people have been saying that AI is going to wreck our brains and make us not good at writing. And I think it's the exact opposite. The reason you can use AI is you're a good writer. If you're not a good writer, you're not going to get the full value of it. And so I think we have to be careful about that. But it actually, I was just talking to I was at an event for a famous university yesterday, and I was talking to one of the deans, and they're not ready yet. They have no idea that like how fast this is changing. So I think that's probably the myth, is that people are afraid of AI giving us mush in our heads. And it's helping us actually move up the category. And if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, to the higher end of the spectrum, and that makes us more human and better humans and less drained by all this rote work. So I think that's a big opportunity.
Agreed. The one element of a winning organization that most companies skip and then later regret.
I think it's pretty simple. It's customer and strategy. Most companies that I've worked with historically, and I was lucky to work at a company called IDEO that really understands human-centered design. It always starts with a human need if you want to have a business. So I think, you can skip over it and there's ways to make money. But if you want to be sustainable and profitable, you got to come back to that. And now change is happening so fast. I think that's going to become more and more important.
Totally. So scratch OD or best practice. When is best practice actually the right call?
When you need something quick and easy and it's short term. Like there's no reason to, like if you're spinning something up quickly, even in AI, we're using plug-in skills, things that are made already can be reassembled. You don't have to make everything from scratch, but as long as you understand nutrition, you can eat healthy, even if you pick a packaged food up. It's about understanding the differences. So quick and easy, nothing wrong with the best practice.
All right, last one here. Finish this sentence for me. The organizations that will thrive in the AI era are the ones who blank.
I guess I'll just this is repetitive, but I'll just say focus on their customer.
All right. A couple of takeaways. There is so much in what you shared that I think will get folks really thinking. But the first one I got is really AI allowing us to rethink work from the ground up, right? And the fact that we are at a point of opportunity here that is bigger than we've ever experienced. I think that really came across as sort of a general starting point that I think listeners will walk away from the show really, hopefully, rethinking where they can rethink. Second is just a general comment. Your enthusiasm for the topic was palpable. I really appreciate that. But you said get excited about it. Obviously, you were excited about it. But I think that's actually, it's not something we've talked about before. We've talked about get curious on the show, but actually get excited about what this opens up for you, for your teams, for the world, right? And go out there and do some of the best work of your career, which you shared that you feel like you're doing right now. And last, I loved Scratch OD and the analogy of it really being like cooking from scratch. So you walked us through, be a chef, understand the ingredients, and then orchestrate the kitchen so that you can make something really, really great. And so in an AI age, there is still a need for us as humans to understand the ingredients so that we can be the chef, so that what comes out the other end and what your kitchen ultimately produces is great stuff. So I'm sure listeners will get that and a lot more from the show. We always leave the guests with the last word here, John. So what do you want the people leader who just listened to us have a chat today to go and think about on the rest of their drive home?
I just read something on Medium that I'll share, which is if you can imagine something in your mind's eye and start writing about it, then you're ready for AI. So imagine what you want to have happen. Think about, describe it in full detail with as many sentences and words as you can, and you've instantly got an entry into building something. So it's actually that easy.
Yeah, you literally can make your imagination come to fruition, come to life in a more concrete way. If you can think it, you can leverage AI to help bring that idea along. Such a great insight. I have enjoyed our chat today so much. Thanks for coming on the show, John.
My pleasure. Thanks, Barb. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us on The Human Element, presented by Whisk. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow The Human Element wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Barb Biden. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.